So I want to introduce Kosta and Holly, who are here to talk about the People's Disclosure Movement. Kosta is worked in the Silicon Valley for 40 years. He's an author and an activist. Holly is an NLP practitioner and a clairvoyant. And so they have a really unique combination of skills, and they're here to tell you about People's Disclosure. So please welcome them.
Can everybody hear me? Yes, I think they can. Are you getting sound from me here, Kevin? Okay, that's cool. All right. I'm Kosta, and this is Hollis, my wife. We are a team doing the People's Disclosure Movement, which I can almost guarantee none of you have ever heard of yet, but that's why we're here to give you more information and hopefully excite you about what we're doing. In a second here. Later on we'll have some question and answer, because I know I'm going to be giving some information that likely will be new to many of you, so feel free to talk to us later on afterwards with any questions, and we'll try to have some answers or questionable answers for you. I'm not sure. How many people here have had a UFO encounter that they know of or that they suspect? Just kind of as a, wow, that's enough. Well, as you know, the topic here is the UFO topic, but I'm going to start off with a lot of disclaimers about what we're not and what the People's Disclosure Movement is not before I can tell you what it is and really what it does. Neither Hollis nor I are like traditional classical ufologists at all, even though as you listen to our personal stories, you'll know that in my case I did have an interest as a child, but never went down the path of doing a deep dive for many years like yourselves maybe, or maybe people that you know. So we're not coming from the ufologist kind of point of view, but we have our own blend and unique take on all that. The People's Disclosure movement also is not a cult. It's not a research study. It's not sponsored by some academic group or anything like that. It really is a people's movement. It's a grassroots movement that I started in 2010. And I'll give you some more information now about what it is. Who are the people and what is it we're disclosing, and why are we doing this? Well, the movement is a response to the many decades of cover-up that not only the U.S. government, but other governments across the world have done concerning the UFO topic. If any of you have even some basic knowledge, you'll know that the cover-up has been going on. There have been lies, there have been manipulations. And within the ufology field, one of the burning questions for decades, and actually as of late, the last few years, has been, when will the government disclose? The evidence, if you really dig deep, seems to be overwhelming that we're being visited. And we're being visited not just in one country, but all across the world. So when will the U.S. government, when will the Russian government, when will the Japanese government, depending on where you are, you're asking aloud sometimes, when is the government going to make an announcement? When will the president stand there or the prime minister and say, yeah, we've been lying to you for decades about this, and here's the truth, and we're really sorry. But here's the truth of the matter. Here are all the files. There's been some limited exposure that's been done by certain governments around that, certain files they have released, but yet many in this field are waiting for a big announcement, and they spend a lot of energy writing books, having discussions and lectures on when disclosure will happen. So in this field, when the people say the word disclosure, they mean disclosure about the UFO ET truth that really came into the public awareness with Kenneth Arnold's sighting in 1947 and has just accelerated since then. So the People's Disclosure Movement is an answer to that. I personally got tired of all those discussions. I got tired of, in the ufology field, all the experts blaming each other. I'm info, you're disinfo, you're saying right, you said this about me. And there's a lot of personality and a lot of ego that's gone on in this, and a lot of controversy about who's telling the truth, who has the right insights and who doesn't. Forget all of that from my point of view, which is why I founded the People's Disclosure Movement in 2010. I decided that we, the people, with the right tools, and that's what we teach at ETLetsTalk.com, and I'll talk more about that, with the right tools of consciousness, meditation, and visualization, we're empowering everyday people like ourselves, like yourselves, to make their own contact. And that means that in this movement and at ETLetsTalk.com, we're starting with the base assumption that, yes, there are visitors here, and they're from many different places, as we're finding out. So for people who want to engage in any kind of debate about, well, they don't exist, they do exist, I'm not interested in that either, because, again, our movement is starting from the premise that the evidence is overwhelming. When I was younger, I was happy to engage in debates about, are they real, are they not? I came to the conclusion after, and you'll see from my own personal experience eventually, that they're very, very real. So starting from that premise that they're here, the question is, what can we as ordinary people do to engage them? They're here for a reason. How did they get here? Why are they here? Who are they? And I think the power ultimately lies in our hands, and that's... Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, I'm still live. Okay, that's good.
Yeah, you are.
All right.
You
We'll
wanna
try
put
to...
it on the back of yours?
If you could clip that, that would help. Yeah. Sorry about that.
You gotta stand up.
Okay.
You can't do it. You can keep talking.
Okay. Yeah, the power lies in our hands to do that using the tools I'm going to talk about here, which is basically your visualization and your heart to make the contact. Now, in the People's Disclosure Movement, we have about 20,000 activists from around the world in more than 100 countries who daily, weekly, and monthly are doing their own kind of contact. And this contact can be done from your living room, anywhere that's safe and comfortable for you, either outside, in a place in nature, maybe a backyard. Hollis and I like to say that we're changing the world one lawn chair at a time, because that's really all it takes is an ability to be still and comfortable, and much like we just were doing here with Judy, being quiet and using our consciousness and our hearts to reach out. They will find you. And I have evidence and pictures and thousands of stories about how that works. And that comes from the people in the community. So again, we have about 20,000 people across the world. We started actually the ETLetsTalk.com website, where I encourage you all to come. And I am sending some information around here about the website. The membership is free. And what we are really is a community, because there are many people, maybe you're one of them, who have had these experiences along the way of contact, either seeing one or maybe actually having, let's say, a telepathic communication from an ET being. But you had to shut up. And that's because your partner, your family, your boss, your coworkers would think you're crazy. And many decades ago, that was more and more true than it is now, although depending on where you are and who you are, you still have to be careful about this. But a lot of us have come out of the closet around this, and I've seen the change in my life. I'm 65 now, and when I was growing up in the early 60s, you really did have to be careful, because you were this, and they would haul you away if you talked about UFOs and contact of any kind. Well, thankfully, a lot of that has changed, and we're part of taking that change forward right now at ETLetsTalk.com and the People's Disclosure Movement. So we are ordinary people like yourselves. Hollis and I have lived, I'm not calling you ordinary. Maybe some of you are really extraordinary, so I don't mean to insult anybody. We're all extraordinary in our own way. We like to call ourselves ordinary people doing extraordinary things, because we really are engaging with beings who understand us, I think, some of them better than we understand ourselves, and are here for reasons, and are willing to engage with us, but they're waiting for us to open up our consciousness and use it, and our intentions and our minds to make a bilateral communication with them. And that's really what we're all about here. And I encourage you to come to the website. Please sign up because you'll get all my, my information, the monthly meditations and contact that we do all over the world. You'll be able to participate in that. And on the website, you'll also be able to see the videos, the pictures, and read the stories of people in all these different places who've been making this contact. I should have mentioned, since 2010 when I founded this, I've been conducting over the internet, because this is pretty much a virtual community. I've been conducting monthly meditations called virtual meditations, where my teams would join up with each other during a 24-hour period around the new moon on a Saturday, because we like dark skies. For people who like to go outside and see the lights in the sky, they do show up, then a dark sky is a good thing. So I've always centered these monthly meditations around the new moon, and I publish it ahead of time. And I've been the cheerleader for that with the support of Hollis month after month, almost 8 years now. And that's where we have had so much contact, and where people who do have that contact then come to the website, they upload their experiences. We have lots of videos of craft in all kinds of configurations and ways, and all sorts of experiences that people tell. So that's what really this is about. It's a community. It's a grassroots community, and we are teaching and sharing with each other, because let's face it, having relied on authorities like governments and other institutions, and the governments are not the only ones, to tell us what's going on in our skies, and this is our planet, relying on them hasn't worked so well, because they've lied and they've covered up, and there are reasons they do that, but that's not the subject of the talk tonight. They have their own reasons, but those are not good enough anymore for us, because we're having secrets withheld from us that would bring our, they like to be called our cosmic brothers, sisters, and cousins, closer to us, even to land among us, and offer technologies that would cure cancers, that would provide free energy, that would probably shake up the very basis of the world system as we know it, and make it more democratic and a more level playing field for all of us. And that's also the subject of another talk. Maybe I could do some other time. But I do want to emphasize there is a reason we're wanting to contact. It's not just to see the lights in the sky, which are cool, or to experience other phenomena on the ground, and we have seen them on the ground, and we have felt them energetically also on the ground. There's a lot going on up there, and it's the biggest secret that's been withheld from us for decades. It's, I would call it the elephant in the room, but it's really the ET in the room, that if you know anything about this, you know is there, but why is nobody talking about it? Well, that's what we're doing right now, people's disclosure. So having said all that, how do ordinary people like us, and we live near San Francisco Airport. Hollis and I have been here since the 80s, the early 80s. I was a computer scientist for almost 40 years here in the Silicon Valley, doing my work and going through my life. And I'll back up a little bit and tell you how I got here. Trust me that Hollis and I both know that we did not intend to be here doing this at our age, at this stage of our lives, because we could not have imagined, probably literally, that we would be making contact with these visitors and then telling other people and teaching other people, which is what we do, how to do it for themselves. So that's what, if nothing else, I want to leave with all of you tonight is this is an empowering exercise. The power has to flow back to the people. The governments, in so many ways, but not just this one, have taken power away from us and have become the high priests of this knowledge. And now with these tools, each one of you has the capability, just like we did and like 20,000 people in the network do, make your own contact, make up your own mind. And what I like to tell people, the reason this is not a cult is I really don't want to be in front of people. I want people to be in front of their own networks. Go out, start your own networks, start your own social media, teach your friends, your family, talk it up. The center is everywhere. I happen to be a cheerleader right now, and I kind of got the ball rolling, but I've been able to see on social media a lot more networks springing up since I started and kind of doing their own thing. And that's great. That's the right idea. This is not about one person or two people being at the head of this. We all have different roles. This is kind of the role that we chose to inform people and to tell you our own experiences, that we're just not talking abstractly, but this stuff has happened to us. So this movement, it really take our power back. Each one of you can be a leader. Each one of you can take it where you want to. And each one of you can participate right now, I strongly believe this, in saving this planet. You don't have to look far to realize that the planet's in peril, and it's going to take a spiritual, and I mean that in the most widest sense of inclusivity, a spiritual explosion of consciousness and caring among a lot of us to bring it from the brink, back from the brink of climate change, catastrophe, war, famine, all these other things that have been besetting us and that could end our civilization. So I see this People's Disclosure Movement also as a means to serve the planet, to serve the people, to serve all of Gaia's life forms. And that's why we have heart in this. It's not, again, just about our minds and what we see and look at the cool lights, although I love that. But it's also about we're opening our hearts and we're offering them to the cosmos, and we're reaching our hands out to our cosmic brothers, sisters, and cousins who have traveled this path. That's why they got this far. They didn't destroy themselves. They're here out of concern, they have told us, for where we are and what we might do to destroy this planet. They're willing to help, not to do our work for us, but to lend a hand where necessary. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So that's the reason we're doing this. It's just not an intellectual exercise, not to take cool pictures. Those are all great. But this really is a service to the planet, to our children and our grandchildren. And I'm sure all of us have this, have relatives that we want to pass a positively transformed planet to. I like to say that the best way to predict the future is to create it. And the People's Disclosure Movement is our contribution to creating the future that we want, what I call the golden age of Gaia. So I've painted for you like a really bigger picture than just a bunch of UFOs. And I hope that you take that all to heart and realize this really is a spiritual movement in the broadest sense of the term to serve the greater whole. And have a lot of serious fun along the way, by the way, which I like to emphasize. So having said all that, that's the big picture. Hollis and I will now give you, if I ever let her talk, give you our personal paths to how we got here. I'll make mine a little bit very short right now. My life changed in 2006, which is what led me to being here right now. Up until then, I grew up in the Midwest in Indiana. I was a young man in the 60s and the 70s, a teenager, during a really exciting time. I think a lot of you may remember that, when the NASA moonshots were going on, regardless of what NASA's kind of controversial in some circles right now, but back then, just rewind the clock, it was the biggest thing. The Mercury, Gemini, Apollo programs captivated the imagination of the world. And as a young man, I was no different in being captivated. I was all over that. I was interested in space. I had a telescope. I would go out in my Indiana backyard in the cold, look at the stars and just feel the wonder of the heavens there. I read a lot of science fiction. And so I was already oriented towards space, this way, that way. When at the age of maybe 10 or 11, I found my first UFO book. And on the cover, it had the classic disc-shaped object with the dome on top that we've seen. And I was immediately captivated. I read it, looked at pictures that had been taken. I've even forgotten the title of it. But I was smitten then. And yet, aside from making a report in my 8th grade science class about UFOs, I kind of let the whole subject drop. I went through school, went through college, got a degree in computer science, a minor in mathematics, came out here to California in 1980, though I didn't know Hollis then. She was arriving on her own path to be here as well. So while I was here, I got married, had two children, not two adult children. Wow, we made history that way, didn't we? That's another talk. They're now adults. They're millennials, which is another important, cool thing. Went through a divorce, got remarried, and worked here in the Silicon Valley doing a very left-brain thing and loving computer science and being on a lot of projects, working in small companies and large companies, and just having kind of a conventional life, never mind the UFOs that kind of captivated me as a young man. Until 2006, one fateful afternoon. But before I tell you what happened then that changed my life and put me on this course, I'll finally allow Hollis to say a few words, or a lot of words, and tell you how she got here.
So I grew up in New Jersey. Like Kosta, I was a huge NASA geek, right? I had at 5 and 6 years old, I had scrapbooks of all the New York Times clippings, of all the NASA stuff. On the other hand, I was not even remotely interested in astronomy, astrology even, UFOs, nothing, okay? It never made sense to me that we were alone in the universe, that we were the only conscious beings in the universe. That just didn't make sense. I can't tell you why, but it never made sense. And when I was 10, my dad gave me Eric von Daniken's Chariots of the Gods, and I read that, and I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, of course they're here. Of course they've been here. That makes sense. Again, dropped that. And I was originally an engineer too, so I have an engineering degree from Princeton, and I will bet you that for people our age, if you're an engineer, NASA was a good reason, the spaceport, yeah. That's why we became engineers. Turned out I didn't do space stuff, but anyway. Eventually, I got a Harvard MBA, moved out to California for a job. Long story, that's long gone. Eventually met Kosta, which brings us relatively to 2006, right?
2006, yeah. We were married then, and in our home near SFO. I sat down bored one afternoon and asked myself, as I was sitting on the internet, wonder what's happened with the UFO field. There must be a lot more information than when I was a kid there. Oh my God. It was like drinking from a fire hose, right? You just started clicking on this and that, and there's a lot of information and disinformation and crap out there, and people faking things, and a lot of people with the real things. And I saw all that in one afternoon as I'm going back and forth going, how am I going to make any sense of all this? Who's true, what's not? But still, it's fascinating. It's come a long way. We have the internet now, and people like me can just while the hours away and waste their life just surfing back and forth to their heart's content. Long story short, I found a group of people who had credible government witnesses and FAA witnesses on camera talking about the subject and how they had come up as whistleblowers. And that fascinated me. There were hours of videotape of all these official people with medals on their chest coming from different parts of black ops programs saying, oh yeah, they're real, and I did this, and I retrieved bodies here, and we tracked them there, whatever. So I thought, okay, there's a certain segment of all this information where a lot of very official people are admitting to this. And then I discovered that there's a group of people that go to Mount Shasta, not too far from here, maybe many of you have been there, who learned something called CE5, which is Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, which stands for Human-Initiated Encounters with Star Visitors that are bilateral and communicative and cooperative. That's CE5. Not many people have heard of that, but you'll hear that thrown around in the circles that we travel in. So again, it means bilateral, but human-initiated. It's not passive. The CE1s through 4 are a passive experience in varying degrees where a UFO shows up and different things happen, and you classify them from a 1 to 4. The 5 is different. You initiate it, and that's what we're about, teaching people to use their meditation, their consciousness, and their hearts to reach out in that way and establish that communication and keep the communication going. So I discovered these people, and I wanted to go for a week because they went out for 6 nights under the stars. And I said, Hollis, I'm a little bit afraid because I read a lot of crazy monster stories from space when I was a kid. But the other part of me is really excited. Like, I didn't know people could do this. Am I like, make a contact? I want to see one. And I said, would you come with me? It's only a week out of our lives. And she said, no. Now, why did she say no? She's not a very fearful person. It wasn't that.
Go. Have a good time. I got a business to run. It's not part of my life.
She had told me, I believe they're out there, like she said here before, it's a big universe, so I support you. And I have to say, even if she weren't standing next to me here now, I would have her to thank just for that much. A lot of people don't get support. I've known marriages that have broken up over this topic, more than one, and a lot of strife in families and others in other situations because of this topic. So the fact that my wife was saying, I don't see how it affects my life day to day, got a business to run, but go, have a good time. So off I went, and I had a good time. I would call her up every morning. I knew she was having her coffee at 6:30 every morning, and I would talk to her about what had happened the night before. We would go into meditation as a group, and for the first time in my life, I saw anomalous lights stopping, swerving, changing direction. People would point lasers, which I actually don't agree with right now. We use strong LED lights instead because lasers are, the strong powered ones are actually illegal. But back then, those people were using them. They would flash at these objects. They would flash back in sequences. I was seeing a lot of this stuff. And I would call her the following morning and go, ooh, you'll never believe what we saw last night, and tell her some tales. Along about the fourth morning, I think, as I called her and was just getting ready to divulge everything that happened the night before, she stopped me and said, wait a minute, I've got something to tell you. And I go, what? What could be more exciting than what I saw? You know? Well, it was. So I'll let her tell her part of the story there, what happened.
So the night before, I was sitting in bed reading, as you do. It's time to go to bed. Close up the book, put it on the nightstand, turn out the light. And as I turn around, there are these 4 little beings standing around the foot of the bed, looking at me. 1, 2, 3, 4, and maybe a 5th one behind them. They were kind of translucent white, maybe 3.5, 4 feet tall, like that. Large heads, skinny neck, narrow shoulders, skinny arms. I assume they were bipedal, but I couldn't tell that because the bed, right, is in the way of them. I can see down to about here on them. And the thing is, there were waves of love coming off them at me. So I wasn't afraid. Like, who could be afraid of that much love? But I was shocked because this had never occurred to me in my wildest dream. I mean, I didn't dream that wild, right? So my mind went blank. And my mind doesn't ever go blank, right? And after a while, I thought, so I hear them, and they're saying to me, one of them anyway, is telepathically saying to me, who are you? Very sweet, right? Who are you? And then I thought, okay, I should ask them something. What do I ask them? And the only thing that occurred to me was to say, where are you from? Better question would be, how'd you get here? But, oh well. Right? But, I was shocked. And what I heard very slowly in my mind was this word, Arcturus. Okay, remember, I wasn't interested in astronomy or astrology. So, I mean, it is possible that somewhere along the way, I had heard that word somewhere. But the next morning, when I told the story to Kosta, I told him the story, and I said, is Arcturus a place?
And I said, yeah, I believe it's a super red giant in the constellation Bootes. And yeah, it's a place. It's kind of astronomy 101. So I gathered my jaw off the ground at that point. So I thought I had all the cool stuff. And I go, oh my God. The next thing she said, which warmed my heart, was, next year I'm coming with you, cowboy. I go, yeah. And that changed her life. to this day, wherever those Arcturian friends are, I always thank them publicly, because were it not for them showing up physically, and I have to say, even though Hollis is a clairvoyant, but she's an internal clairvoyant. She does not see externally, like auras and things. Not well, not like other really good external clairvoyants do. What she saw was with her physical eyes, right there in the bed, and they dematerialized after a little while.
Right, after that Arcturus thing, they kind of just faded away.
So I was gobsmacked and realized our lives had just changed. And again, I thank them for that, because were it not for something that up close and personal for Hollis, she wouldn't be standing here.
Right, now it's part of my life.
No, yeah, very much part of our lives. And I will say I had another experience that week that changed my life that was as dramatic as hers. I was part of a group of 10 people. There were 9 others with me. We had been at the base of Mount Shasta. We had done our meditation that night, like we had done several nights before as a group, and we'd finished around midnight. So most people in the group were already driving away and going back to their hotels. A few of us stood around in the clearing still talking about that night's activities, because like all the other nights we'd been seeing things and experiencing. So we were talking, and then someone tugs my sleeve and points me to a place about from here to that chair, and points, and I go, yeah, what is it? And as I stared, and there was a partial moon, and I was trying to make sure that the foliage and the moon and whatever were not what I was seeing, but what I was seeing was slowly materializing a sphere, maybe about this big around, that was floating a few inches off the ground, and it was becoming more and more material, almost kind of like someone was just pressing a button and like in a special effects movie or something, and making the thing just get more solid and solid. And I was gobsmacked again. This thing was opaque, gray to my eyes. Other people saw different colors, but it was there. It was that big around. It was floating there. There was no noise, no wind, no vibration, no other kind of sensory input to us. It was just there. So 9 of us or 10 of us just standing there looking at it for half an hour. Nobody thought to pull out a digital camera because we had them, much less myself. I'm hitting myself to this day. And just go click, click, click. Nobody did that, but we were talking very quietly amongst ourselves, like, you see that? Almost afraid that if we talked too loud, the thing would go away, but it wasn't. It was just floating there. And it shouldn't have been there, because the laws of physics I know said that should not be happening. But we were sober, we were straight, we were awake. It was a cold night. We were very alert. And there were, like I said, 10 of us, adults. One of the people from across the way spoke up and said, hey, I just got a telepathic message from one of the beings inside of there. And we said, what was it? And there was a gentleman who said, they told me that they are researchers, and they're here on Earth to study the human energy systems, to study our auras. And I go, great, we're somebody's PhD thesis. You know, they're doing field work. You know, well, that's cool. They're here. And I go, okay, that's what you say you heard. That's as good as anything I've got, which is nothing. Now, the next thing that happened is standing next to me, as close as Hollis is, but on my right side was a friend of mine from the retreat there, named Gloria, a very good psychic lady, very strong kind of woman, and I'll tell you why that matters in this case. But she was standing like this next to me for half an hour, not moving, not budging at all. Try holding your hands out like this for half an hour. It hurts after a while, but she was doing that. And I looked over at her and I thought, okay, something's going on. I don't want to interrupt it, but I'm close enough. If she shows any signs of distress, I'm right here. You know, I'll deal with it, help her. At the end of the half hour, she just kind of started wavering like this, and I grabbed her by the shoulders. I realized something had changed. And I steadied her, and I was asking her, you know, what's your name? Do you know where you are? Who am I? She answered all the questions, and she just said, I'm just a little queasy. I said, what happened? She said, well, psychically, telepathically, I got a message from one of the beings inside, one of the scientists. They asked me if they could merge with me to study my aura, my energy body. And I said, and? She goes, I said yes. I go, you're pretty brave. I think I would have run the other way with my tail between my legs, but no, but she said, I said yes. I go, and I thought, what a presence of mind and spirit to do that. I said, well, then what? She says, well, I told them telepathically it was okay to do that, but I had 3 conditions. I go, yeah. One was that I stay conscious. She didn't want to be knocked out and unaware of her surroundings. So the being said, okay. And the second condition was that they would leave when I asked them to. And apparently that did happen. At the end of that half hour when I saw her kind of wavering, she had said, okay, I'm done, and they left. And actually the globe started dematerializing at that point, just fading into the background a little bit. And I said, what was the third condition? She said, no messing with the sexual organs. I don't want any probing. And she was quite serious. I mean, it's funny, but there's that in the ufology field, the abduction and all that stuff. That's a whole nother topic. There's a lot of talk about that. And so she was on that and said, no messing with me there. And they said, okay. They did their work apparently. She told them to leave. They left. So the thing dematerialized, and that whole experience changed my life because this was my up close and personal experience. All my life, I had known people, the girlfriend of a brother, another friend, you know who I'm talking about, in our kitchen, who had mothership sightings in the desert, people that are as grounded as anybody you'll ever meet. One of them ran a presidential campaign, and I won't say who it is, a U.S. presidential. That's how grounded this person was, telling us about a mothership in the desert that pulled their car, whatever, and other close stories of hovering UFOs where the car would die. And this was told to me by people I trusted, who were not on drugs, were not drinking or anything. So I always had these secondhand stories, and that was part of my gestalt, that, yeah, I believe they're there. But I'll tell you, until you have your own sighting, whether it's in the sky or something like what happened to me or what happened to Hollis, you can't be prepared for that. Suddenly it's really internalized, and you go, oh my God, this is real. What do I do with it now? Well, this is what I'm doing with it now. I decided I want to organize people across the planet to teach them the simple meditation techniques that we've been using to do this so that we can have our own experiences. And even if they don't agree with what my philosophy or what I've seen, at least they're having their own experiences. It's what I was talking about earlier. We're taking our power back. So even though, like I said, you and I may not agree with what we saw or interpret it right, at least you did it on your own, and you didn't rely on somebody telling you, no, you didn't see anything. Move right along, nothing to see here. So that was my personal experience. That brought me here, and I'll leave you with this final bit of information. I so much wanted to organize people to teach them this, and this came out of my activities in the 60s. I was also a young political activist. I forgot to mention that earlier. I was against the war in Vietnam and was organizing. I was working with the environmental movement, the women's movement. So I was a natural kind of organizer, and I enjoyed that. Well, now I had the internet, the coolest tool ever, right, at my fingertips. And I thought, and I knew that there were people across the planet that knew these techniques, but nobody was organizing them. And at that point, I got email lists together, and that's why I'm passing things around. I created a community, and I've been nurturing that community as much as I can. Got 20,000 people now, and this is what we do. People can do this contact anytime, anywhere, but at least that once a month time that I mentioned, I tried to get the teams together globally, virtually, in our imaginations for those 24 hours to do it together and to create a group field, which is a field of welcome and invitation. So before creating that large group, I knew that because I had a full-time job, this would be very labor-intensive. Was this of any use to what I call my ET friends to do this kind of organizing? I just didn't want to waste my time. Thanks to Hollis's ability at that time and now to connect with them, I was able to ask them questions. So I posed that question to them that I just mentioned to you now. Hey, do you all find any value in someone like me, organizing people, doing it on a monthly basis, trying to build a community, sharing our stories, supporting each other, etc.? And the answer was absolutely. And they gave me a directive, which was, or a request, which was build us as many ET contact teams as possible, in as many places as possible, as quickly as possible. And I said, okay, I understand that, and that sounds cool. Those are my marching, I won't say orders because this was all voluntary, but this is, I can do this, I can understand this, thank you. And then I asked, what's the end game? Well, they said, we don't infringe on human free will. Well, there's one exception, and that's they will not allow a nuclear war to happen globally. They will not allow that. And there's lots of evidence of them shutting down nukes on all sides. It's out there in the field. With that exception, they said, we need human permission of human free will to appear in many more cities. If you get the teams out there, that will give us permission to appear in more cities. As we do that, the skies above more cities, I should say. They said, as we do that, more humans will see us and want to see us even more, giving us permission to appear in even more places where more humans will see us, giving us permission to appear in more places. They call this a virtuous circle. And I said, okay, what's the end game of all that? They said, well, someday a tipping point will be reached where so many people globally have seen us, experienced us, that no government, no institution of authority will ever again be able to cover this up, because that will have been the people's experience, and they will believe their own lying eyes, not what someone else is telling them. And I go, okay, that makes sense. We're looking for a tipping point. I don't know how many teams have to be out there for this tipping point to be reached. I didn't ask that question. Not sure that I would get an answer if I did. But the People's Disclosure Movement is going on the basis of we're just going to keep building teams, growing organically, encouraging people, and someday that point will be reached. And I can't predict what will happen. Will they land on the White House lawn? Will they make their own announcements? I don't know. There are many civilizations cooperating with each other, we've learned out there. They've got a way bigger picture than I certainly have, and neither of us has all the answers. This is still an experiential community, but I'm just bringing you up to date on what it is that we know and believe, what we've learned, and that is there's an incredible future awaiting, and we're building it right now by getting the ET contact teams out there and teaching more and more people to do it. And I'll leave you with one more fact. Localities.com is a Dutch internet research firm that takes clients and they do research. At localities.com, you can download a PDF that is one of their research papers that studied the attitudes of adults across the globe towards extraterrestrial issues. And that was fascinating. It's the largest that's ever been done, and I think it had 26,000 people from 24 countries, and it cut across cultures, included every major continent, religions, whatever. It was a nice snapshot of humanity. And they were asking questions about ET for the first time on this scale. And two questions really interested me. The first question, there were many questions they asked, but two that I honed in on real fast because of what we do with the People's Disclosure Movement. And the first question was, do you believe ET civilizations exist out there? And by that, they specifically meant not some microbe that might be evolving under a rock, an Alpha Centauri 3 or something. They meant civilizations, full on. And 60% of the people, the respondents, said yes. Now, never mind the 40% that said no. I'm sticking with the yes parts because that's what interests me. 60% said yes. The follow-on question to that was, okay, you believe they exist. Should we be communicating with them? 40% of the respondents said yes. The other 60%, we don't know what their reasons are. That wasn't delineated. But 40% said yes. So I walked away with a couple of percentages. And I went back and extended their research myself. I'm kind of a math numbers guy. I looked at the world population During the 3 months that they conducted this study, December 2015 to February 2016, I looked at the global adult population and I applied their percentages on those two questions to the whole planet. And the calculation I came up with is that there are 1.3 billion adults between the ages of 18 and 65 on this planet who believe that alien civilizations exist and that we should be connecting with them, contacting them. Now, I like to say that that's the sweet spot. In theory, that many people would agree with what we do here in the People's Disclosure Movement, teaching people to make their own contact. 1.3 billion people are not going to go out tomorrow like we do and grab our lawn chairs and make contact and shoot video and stuff. Half of them are wondering where their next meal is going to come from the following morning. You know, that's the state of the earth today. Some small percentage, and many of them are millennials, which we're going to be trying to reach through social media and have been actually reaching out to more and more. They're already open to this. And they're the low-hanging fruit, and it's their generation that's going to carry forward from where all of us will leave here. And that's the legacy I want to leave. I want to teach as many millennials and those that come after them as possible, because many of them are part of that 1.3 billion. And they will get the chance to reach out and become cosmic humanity. When my kids were little, I told them, they're 29 and 27, I told them, your generation is going to go to the stars, if I have anything to say about it, and the people that I know. If you're going to live longer, and that contact is going to happen. You guys are going to become cosmic humanity. So those are the stories I raised them on, and this is us working towards that end. If you want to add anything. Okay. I took all the words out of the atmosphere. What's that?
I said Kosta and Silent Hollis.
That New Jersey movie, right? Yeah. But that's kind of the big picture. That's our. These are our personal stories, how we're doing this, and I invite any and all of you to just come to the website. The membership's free. You'll get my emails. We also do retreats. We're doing one in Bloomington, Indiana, where we go out under the stars for 6 nights and meet face-to-face with people in small groups, and we see stuff. We film stuff. We have some amazing footage from professional people with equipment like that, but multiplied by 10 with night vision, near infrared, you name it. They shoot it for us and archive it, so that we actually have proof of what we do. In October, we'll be in Joshua Tree. And if you know anybody that wants to join us there for 6 nights, it's all very affordable. We're out in the desert, and we make the contact for 6 nights. We've been doing this for several years and had some good results. Having said all that, I see a hand over there.
Is there a relationship between this group and Stephen Greer's group? And how does this group differ from what you guys?
I worked as a volunteer with Mr. Greer for 6 years, very closely. And in 2012, we parted ways, professional and personal differences, which, if you know his history, I'm not the only person. That's happened over and over again with a lot of people. And that's when I formed ETLetsTalk.com to carve my own path. There's similarities in that we're using consciousness, we're using intention, we're reaching out, and we're looking for creating a golden age of Earth. He talks about that, an age of peace and all that. So there are similarities there. But yet, yeah, we're independent right now, and we'll remain that way. Did that answer your question? Okay. Yes?
If we sign up on your email list, do we still have to go to your website and join as a member, or are we already your emails?
If you sign up here, you'll be on an email list that gets all the anything I have to communicate, so you don't have to be on the website. I encourage you to go on the website. There's pictures and videos and stories there, and there's a map.
The map.
Yeah, there's a map too. One of the things I find in this community when people discover what we do, one of the first 2 things I hear is, oh my God, I'm glad I found a community. Everyone's been telling me I'm crazy. They're disowning me. They're not talking to me. You know, and I have people to talk to. I hear that over and over. The next thing is there anybody in my town that does this? And I tell them, come to the website. Again, it's free. And there's a map there with little pins all over. You've seen these Google kind of maps all over by now if you're on the internet of places. And you can mouse over anywhere in the world and see if there's someone near you. Unfortunately, our movement is not big enough that I have a team in every city of the planet. I would love for that to happen. But more often than not, somebody has to settle for someone in a city that's within an hour or two drive, and then they can get together because people want community. They want to share this.
I was just going to talk about Danberg and in Canada and meeting the guy from like 3 hours away. They met at a...
Yeah, she's just asking me to give an example of people get lit up about this and how they want to find a community in doing that. A gentleman who's working with me now, Dan Berg, is from Revelstoke, Canada, 10,000 people. A long story short was he went on the map on my website, found a guy 3 hours away, the closest there, and they met to do the CE5, to do the contact. Nothing much seemed to happen this Saturday night, and they just went home and agreed to try it again the next month. Well, long story short again, it turned out there was a weird manifestation of these circles that appeared on a lake the morning after they did this. A frozen lake, yeah. That made the papers. And while Dan did not claim to have caused that, everyone jumped on that and said, this is ET stuff. We've never seen this before. He became a local celebrity, got stories written about him. And people started coming to his dealership where he works. It's great for business. He runs a car dealership, yeah, a Ford. So, instant celebrity. And what I'm saying now is that his natural enthusiasm, and he's been joining us on our retreats, and he has gone home with really definite experiences of his own and with the group, takes them back home. When he's with us, like at Mount Shasta recently, he has to turn off his phone because his folks back home are all texting him. Have you seen anything? Tell us what's going on. Are you going to have a gathering when you get home? And he's turned on the whole town of 10,000. I'm not saying they're all doing this, but everybody in that town knows that this is possible. They know there's a group going out regularly doing this. He tells me that if he wanted to, he could have 200 people like that on any given night to show up and do this.
And I think he said he had something like 40 people last month, and because he has the dealership, they were going up high on a mountain. He goes, yeah, we took dealership cars. We took all these like Ford Expeditions up the mountain.
It's, hey, I like this car. It drives nice. Hey, you want to buy one? Yeah. That's a little aside, and we kid about that, but hey, it doesn't hurt. I'm bringing that up as an example of this has been inspiring even to me, you know, that someone with his enthusiasm and just the right situation and the right success, because when he takes his people out, they come back and their jaws are hitting the ground. They've seen the lights in the sky stand still, zigzag, change direction, flash in sequences when they're flashed back, get messages, all that stuff. People are moved by that. So that's just one good example of the power of one person, really, and their enthusiasm, how they can turn a lot of people onto this.
Yeah, two questions. One, is it just a matter of intention? A lot of times, like when I go into a meditation, I might go to meet a spirit guide or an angel or whatever, and how would you know if you're meeting...
You know what? You don't. Here's the thing. I no longer know, because I've had my own guides forever, actually since I was a little kid. And I, you know, when I was told like, oh, shut up, you're wrong, you're crazy, whatever, right? I learned not to talk about it. And you know, that contact was all pretty much audio. Like, I call them the folks, would tell me stuff, right? Obviously, I had my one, you know, manifestation where they showed up in my bedroom, and I've had a time where they were somebody in the field. There was somebody like right next to me, and there were 17 people out there, and every single person could feel that being's energy field. And I no longer know, when you call it a high being, is that necessarily a star visitor? Is it somebody you would call, you know, an angel or an archangel? Like, I don't know where the difference is, if there is one. I mean, higher consciousness is higher consciousness, no matter what body it may or may not inhabit. Does that make sense?
It's there's a study called by the Free Foundation, experiencers.org, They just published an 820-page tome of research using 3,000 to 4,000 people, depending on which phase of the study, of experiencers. And I recommend going out to get it, experiencers.org. It's the first study of its kind that has done a statistical analysis of the kind of thing that you were talking about, where they call them the contact modalities. Even though the book is called it's called Beyond UFOs, because it posits the same thing you're talking about, which is how do you know? The people in their study reported all kinds of experiences, some that they could identify overtly as, oh, this was a star visitor, and some that were squishy somewhere, but yet something happened. And none of the research was done under hypnosis. They filtered that out. They wanted people in conscious, lucid kind of states, not just regression for this particular study. Anyway, so that book, I think, addresses what you're talking about. It's contact modalities. You know, they don't necessarily say everything's ET or everything is interdimensional or whatever. But and you
okay, so the book was occasioned by contact that kind of the lead author, his name is Ray Hernandez, had. And his wife is a devout Catholic. They had an experience in their living room where something showed up and healed their dog who was very sick. And she said, you know, oh, it's an angel. And he saw an orb. He saw, you know, an orb. So, you know, maybe it's your preconception defines for you what they are. Or perhaps what were called angels in the Bible were extraterrestrials. Like, we don't know.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
speaking of the healing,
Yeah.
you mentioned something about they have information that could help us to heal things or do electricity for free. So when does that occur?
I wish I could answer that.
Okay,
I don't
on
know.
the free energy, there's been a lot of information given and prototypes made, and that stuff has been smashed and stolen by our government, and it's been taken from us. That's already happened. We just need to get access to it, and that's a terrestrial problem. That's not about them.
And yet they're using those kinds of energy to get here. So,
Yeah.
so they have technologies. Yeah, go on.
Is it important to have a particular composition of these teams, like someone that's psychic or someone that has the personality of the Sky Canada, or just
No.
any 10 people or less?
Yeah, I caution people to build their teams carefully, and the answer is no, it's not necessary. But what is necessary is people's hearts. It doesn't mean you have to be a believer, but the heart of a skeptic will squash any contact. If you're open-minded and willing, that's different. The heart of a skeptic is different. So than that, I would not allow a known skeptic into one of my groups that I'm building. Having said that, there's a whole range of people. There's people like Hollis that are psychic this way, others that are psychic in other ways, others that are not. And that's kind of good because, you know, when a phenomenon happens in the sky, you've got all this sensory input. The psychic is seeing this and reporting this. Maybe someone else is seeing another. It's like the blind man with the elephant. You're each getting a different part of it, and maybe if you put the jigsaw together, in your aggregate, you've got more information than any one of you has alone. So it's a positive thing to have a mix in the group. But again, the important thing is goodwill, intention, an open, loving heart, and the ability to be still and calm your mind.
And I'd like to add one other thing. Skepticism will stifle contact. So will fear. And I mean, we have a group, we go out every month. I mean, there's like 5 of us, we're friends. Like now we're friends. It started out this way, we know each other, we're friends. And we can go out, we can have amazing contact. And, you know, other people will come into the group, and we've had people come in and like nothing happened. Like nothing. And I remember one night we finished, and this one guy basically said he was afraid that something would happen. Well, there you go. Right? Or another time we were up at Mount Shasta, and there was a craft in the hills probably a half a mile away. And we had amazing contact. We flashed our lights and it flashed back at us. Like all this stuff happened, went on for like half an hour, 45 minutes. The next morning, and there were a bunch of us going, come closer, come closer. The next morning we found out that the person who spotted it, what she said was, it stayed the perfect distance away so that I wasn't afraid.
And
Okay.
and that shows that they're honoring. They're not there to make the person who's fearful more fearful.
Right.
So they will honor that even if the rest of us are going, come, it's closer.
So when we do retreats, I do some stuff to decrease fear because that's really important, right? People make up stuff and then they get afraid of it. So,
And also
right?
people will say, I'm not afraid. Okay, we say, come in. And then later on we found out they were fooling themselves. Or I don't want to say lying because I don't think people are lying, but they were just fooling themselves. They wanted to be part of the group. They said, I'm not afraid. They got in. And then when they're really there in the circle and facing the prospect that something's going to happen, they come to grips with themselves and probably are thinking, no, I'm not ready for this. Well, thanks. I saw you there first. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, a few things. First, I want to say I agree with you 100%. Consciousness, high consciousness is high consciousness no matter where we find it. Secondly, thank you for your candid answer towards Stephen Greer. I find you two have a huge amount of integrity and sincerity. I also know Greer. I'll leave it at that. Third, I came a little late. I'm wondering how many people do you have in your group, and do you have a guess at all how many people are still following Greer and his groups?
I don't have an answer to that question at all about Dr. Greer. My community has 20,000 people, give or take, and I want it to become 200,000 and 2 million because that's all. I don't know if you were here when I told the story about how I was asked to increase as many teams as possible, as quickly as possible in as many places. Well, I want those 20,000 again to become 200, 2 million. I know they're out there. It's just marketing, folks. We don't have the wherewithal to be sitting in front of groups like this. It would take us forever to reach that many people. But through the internet, through media, we're presenting our story. We're telling our story, and we're telling people, hey, if we can do this, so can you. And that's the road we'll take to getting to a larger number. Did I answer your question?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And sorry, I get her. You're next. Okay.
I'm curious what you think about ETs and crop circles, because I do believe that there is kind of a Gaia effect with the pulse waves, that these crop circles are created in minutes. And also, do you use night-seeing goggles in your retreats so you can see more of what's going on?
Yeah, go ahead.
well, actually, we haven't talked about this, but I'm pretty much there with our star visitor friends are creating the crop circles. Partly because you can't manipulate the plant in the way that they do as fast as they do in ways that humans know, number one. And number two, how would you do those incredible, intricate, large designs without being overhead? So that's me. I don't know if you...
No, I quite agree. Yeah, there have been probably a few people that have faked, Dave and Dave or whatever with their boards, Yeah, but in general, I do believe those circles are a non-threatening, amazing way for another civilization to tell us, hey, we're here. Maybe we can't land because there are geopolitical reasons and the militaries of the world are going to start wars with us. It's a complex thing. But they can send probes down and they can create those, and the rest of us sit back and go, human beings could not have done this. Not so many of these, so many years, this intricately. So yeah, I'm all over that. And I think they're a brilliant way to communicate, really. Go ahead.
Well, I think that when you get a lot or a group of people together that are like-minded, that energy, just like during the meditation here, I think it produces a strong effect, whatever you're trying to do. So I understand that, but I'm just wondering, you mentioned something about your, not armchair, whatever.
Lawn chairs.
chair.
Lawn chair.
So I was thinking, you know, a lot of times in my life, I've sat out in the backyard and just gazed at the stars and everything, and you wish something would be there. But and I was thinking, you're telling us that we can all do this. Are you also saying that you need a group to have that group energy, or can you just go out with your husband or a friend and sit in your backyard and have the same experience that you're talking about, or is it? I don't know.
No, okay,
I
so
need to go to Mount Shasta to have this
no,
No.
it's good to be in a place that's dark
right.
because you can see more. But like, there's a couple. Are they outside Nashville, Knoxville, somewhere? They're in Tennessee, and they go out every month, and it's just the two of them, and they have some amazing sightings. So, and we just met a guy from Canada, a different guy, who apparently goes out by himself and has amazing sightings. So I think it's, your open heart, your clear intent, coherence if there's more than one of you. I also think it's good to be in a group for a little while, because I have a suspicion that once, and I don't know how this happens, that once they find you, they can always find you.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know how that works.
Well, yeah. And I want to add to that, what did I want to add to that? Yes to what you said about group, the group field augments things, and sometimes we're human beings, we're social animals. We feel better in a group and things come easier. But anywhere, ET will find a way, creative ways to contact you. It's not just the lights in the sky. We've had weird electrical phenomenon that was clearly, smartphones turning themselves on and playing a cosmic song from the playlist, all on their own, after doing a meditation. And it goes on and on. On the website, I have 7 steps there that I recommend that people do when they sit down, whether they're with themselves or in a group. In those steps, what's key is to hook into the group field, because I have you visualize the earth and all the groups all over the earth as a network of light and through the heart, and link with them. So in that way, even if you're alone, you're still with the huge group. And people have come back and said, wow, I felt the global group last Saturday, or I actually saw it in my mind. So I recommend that people go to the website and read those instructions alone and realize you're not really alone. This is a huge, huge undertaking. Yeah.
So you touched on a little bit about the reasons why they come here. Like you said, the sphere beings were here for research. But you said there are also a lot of different beings, or perhaps different types of beings here. And are they here for different reasons? What are those reasons, and can we be sure that all their reasons are benign?
I don't think you can be sure. I'm not someone who believes that every civilization here is of the highest order. It's a big universe. However, having said that, and this gets in deeper into things that probably would require a whole nother lecture, but I think the negative ones who've been troublesome are being handled right now by the much greater forces that have shown up. And certainly what we're doing is we're only aligning with the highest vibrations when we do our work, so that we're assured of whatever other negativities may be out there. And they may be on the astral plane or whatever. They may be terrestrial. We're not just talking about bad, ugly, weird ETs. We're raising our vibration, and that is a protection, and that will draw in the overwhelming positive in numbers and in power races.
Okay.
You want to say something?
Yeah. In the Beyond UFO Contact book, in that survey, depending on kind of the question, how it was asked, between 2/3 and 3/4 of the respondents had positive contact.
That was actually 80% or more. I think.
That's not what I remember, but
No, that's what they're
anyway,
advertising.
it was an overwhelmingly positive contact. So, and I forget what the other question was, because I had something to say about that too. You had a second question that I.
The question was, why do they come here, and
Oh.
are they all benign?
Oh, we don't know why, but you asked how many, and Clifford Stone, who was an Army sergeant, whose real job, he had like a clerical job, which was his cover, but his real job was to go to UFO crash sites and do retrievals. And he helped some escape and whatever. I met him. He's lovely. He said he had a manual that had literally 57 different kinds of extraterrestrials that they had cataloged. That was what the U.S. Army knew about.
And the manual was instructions to the first responders at crash sites on what drug they could give the victim.
Or not.
Or not give, because they had that kind of knowledge. He'll sit here and he'll tell you that. We met him, and he's a very self-effacing man.
And actually,
this
cool thing happened. Yeah, and actually this cool thing happened. We met him in a setting kind of like this where we were each presenters. And I won't tell you the whole story, but he had to leave partly through mine, so I ended up talking to him afterwards, and so he didn't hear my story. And I told him my story, and he said, "Oh, I brought a painting, and I thought it was for the group, but I didn't use it during my talk. I think I brought it for you." And he brought out a painting another woman had done, like this big, of the beings that had showed up in my bedroom. Only she saw more detail than I did. So.
And he said they called those in his
Type 2 grays, yeah.
Type 2 grays. So this is what I mean about the cover-up. You know, we're being told, you didn't see anything, we're being dumbed down, you're all crazy, when at the same time, they've got manuals of 57 races and how to deal with their biology when you find them laying on the ground and they're partly alive. You know, there's a little bit of a disconnect here. They try to shoot them down. They've reverse engineered some, and
But I
yeah.
don't think it was that many. I think.
No. I wouldn't say they crashed a lot. I don't have numbers, but the idea we got from him was he had done maybe 12. Yeah, he maybe had done a dozen. And again, he was a first responder. He was by day a desk clerk, by night or by day.
He would get a call. Like,
he would get a
to
call.
Go to Russia or whatever. Yeah.
There's one
They'd
down
fly
over
him
here,
off,
and he would rush out there and find bodies that were not alive, or some that were alive, and he would administer to them. Flip the manual. Oh my God, this is a type 6 zeta reticuli. I gotta get this. I'm kind of being a little funny about that, but that's the way he had to work. No. The next time I'm going to ask him about it. Clifford Stone, Sergeant Clifford Stone.
Did he write his book?
Yes, he did, and I don't remember the title of it, telling about his life. And he was a contactee from an early age.
Yeah.
He has an ongoing ET that's with him that has guided him since he was little. And I think that the way that those who are covering this up work, they have ways of identifying those who are gifted in the ways that he was, because he was very good psychic, and figuring out ways to get them into their programs because they want to use them. And obviously he was used because as he told us, the ones that survived the crashes, he was able to communicate with telepathically. Yeah. He had that gift that maybe you and I could not do as easily. So he was singled out. He was used that way. He wrote about that. And if I could remember the book, I'm sorry, I can't.
Good, thank you.
What's it?
Eyes Only.
Eyes Only. Yeah. Clifford Stone, S-T-O-N-E.
Wait, who singled him out, the ETs or the...
Well, the ET singled him out because they knew they had a connection with him. But the government, the deep part of the government, also has ways to detect gifted people. And we know people like that who've been drawn into Black Ops programs because of their skills, and some have escaped. That's a whole nother story. Yeah, okay. In the back?
Just a couple of thoughts. One, you mentioned it, but I think we want to go quick, and that is whether we do it in groups or we do it individually, we put out only the highest intention. That keeps the negative folks away.
Absolutely.
Secondly, you're bringing up some of the things about how many are there, and people are bringing it up. There's also government people who will say there's over 150 now. Who knows?
Who knows?
But here's some of the things we do know. The Federal Disaster Control Guide literally has it in case of UFO attack, here's what we do. Secondly, if any American citizen should have personal contact, they're subject to imprisonment and a $250,000 fine.
Wow.
So they're covering their asses,
Wow.
pretty much.
Yeah.
And so it's always best that we do this with like-minded people who know how to communicate with each other and show some discretion.
You're right. You're right about that. Go on. Here's my speculation. The technologies, space is really, 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 really big. And they're using technologies that are not known to us in traditional physics to get here. Whatever technologies they're using, the free energy, zero-point energy, are of interest to the government. They want to squelch that because the fossil fuel game that's being played, the wars that have been started where you fund both sides, and on, the military-industrial complex that Eisenhower warned us about took over this matter and created the cover-up because they have the most to lose. If we're not in fear and fighting each other, and they're selling arms to both sides, and we're forced to buy gas, and we're at their mercy of shortages and whatnot, they got us. ET, the first time we had a sighting in the sky, already that one craft, and we've seen hundreds of them, had the power to undo the entire global infrastructure of the fossil fuel game by what they were using. That's a big threat. And the military might, and I'm not anti-military, don't get me wrong. I think there's a lot of white hats in the military who are trying to bring this out and doing good things. They're fighting with the other side who want to keep the control. So it's a control game, sadly. And we're the victims of that. Free energy right now would run our cars, our homes, our cities forever, non-polluting, for nothing. Imagine how that would change your life. You wouldn't have to work a 40-hour week. And this is what I tell people when they say, well, okay, like Hollis was saying, I believe they're here, but what's it got to do with my life? My answer is everything, everything. Your sons and daughters and your grandchildren will not have to go fight a war to get the oil under someone else's sand to enrich the military-industrial complex if there were free energy, for example. You could spend those 40 hours a week working. When you take the energy component out of the cost of manufacturing things, you won't have to work 40 hours a week to produce stuff, right? Because it'll be free, the energy to produce it. So we'll have a lot more creative energy. Imagine what the human spirit can do, how we'll get along better with each other when we're not stressed out over surviving. Half the planet goes to bed not knowing where their next meal is coming from. This is an abomination against the heart of the cosmic, that we should have that. And it's unnecessary. It's all man-made. And I emphasize man. Yeah, so I'll have to take this one, then I'll get to you. Go ahead.
I wondered what you thought of Trump's announcement of a Space Force about a week ago.
The Space Force.
You know, it's another...
I think it's akin to Reagan's Star Wars thing, which was just an excuse to... Some of those weapons that they did put up there, they're aimed out in space. They're not just aimed at Earth. Tell me about that. I think this is another incarnation of that. Honestly, I'm not spending my... You guys are all bringing up great questions. I mean, these are burning issues that I wish more of the population would know. And I would say my answer to every single one of them is go out and do this yourself. And tell somebody and teach somebody else and have them teach somebody. Because eventually enough of us will know this truth that psychically the group field that we build for disclosure on an energetic level will overwhelm, neutralize all the control systems that have kept us in ignorance. This is our cosmic heritage. Our friends said, think of us as cosmic brothers, sisters, and cousins, and they meant it, you know. Imagine someone trying to keep us away from our relatives. I'll tell you one other quick story. When I heard that phrase, don't think of us as gods, as the Fuller phrase, they quickly addressed us when they were speaking through Hollis. Don't think of us as gods. We're cosmic elder brothers, sisters, and cousins. We're your elder brothers, sisters, and cousins. And I thought, that's great. I'm going to use that phrase because everybody can understand that. I was, shortly thereafter, I was driving on Highway 80 to Sacramento in the fast lane as usual, looking for cops because I'm doing 80 right in the rearview mirror. And Hollis was in Sacramento and I was going to meet her. So I was anxious to get there and there wasn't a lot of traffic on the road. So I was zoned out in the fast lane, again doing 80. And if any of you have ever driven for long distances on the highway, there are times where you kind of come to and you go, who's been driving for the last half hour? How did I get here? Okay, well, I'm going to pay attention now. I had one of those moments, but what happened to me that interrupted me out of my little zone there, just 80 in the fast lane, this semi on my right comes whipping by me. He had to be doing 100 in that lane, not the fast lane. I'm in the fast lane. Whipping by and I go, wow, that's dangerous. And before I could react, and now I'm alert, kind of got me out of my stupor, a second semi goes behind that one, ostensibly slower because as it passed me on the back of the trailer, the back face of it, because now it's on my right and it's going past me and I see on the back face, there's writing on the back of that face and it's in big block letters. If you've ever seen a car and you were a little mischievous and you wrote, wash me on the windshield of a really dirty car, I did that just about a month ago, so I revisited my inner adolescent. But in that same way, maybe there was dirt on it, whatever, but in big block letters, printing, was written, ETs are family. And it just was gone. And by now I'm really awake. I'm going, say what? I go, either that's the world's funniest truck driver who stopped at the truck stop a way back and thought, I'm going to mess with somebody on the highway and I'm going to put this cruel message up here. I really don't think it was that. This is where I say they find ways, whether it's smartphones, messages like that, and this one was in my face. Like I said, right after Hollis we had talked with them, they said, ETs are family on the back of a truck. And then it was gone. I've never seen it again, obviously. But, how do you explain that? That wasn't random. You had a question here, yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering if you knew if this Clifford person that went to these crash sites, if he ever came across any kind of a hybrid biological being, like an android or
I don't know.
Combination, or
that's a good question.
Right,
no, I don't know how active he is in writing now.
I haven't read the book.
No, I read the book and I can't recall. It was 2014. I've kind of forgotten if he addressed that specific kind. It was more kind of an anecdotal book. I mean, another kind of person would have written a highly technical, well, this is what I've seen, this is what I've encountered, and this is how I dealt with it. Clifford's was more of a personal story. So that's why I can't answer that question. He didn't go into that kind of detail from what I can remember. So sorry, I can't answer that. I wish I could. My transporter Bream's in the garage. Otherwise, I would bring him right here, right now. So, wait, you haven't talked before, so go ahead.
I'm wondering, two questions. Have you had any more contact with the Arcturian? And secondly, do you have an opinion on the experiences that Corey Good has been sharing?
Okay, they haven't showed up that way unless that, like I said, one night we were up in one of the places we regularly make contact, and there was a being who was kind of the same size that everybody could feel, but I couldn't see him and nobody else did, so I don't know. So I can't really, I don't know for sure. Okay.
To answer the Corey Good thing, I personally don't believe him. I do believe there's a secret space program. We're friends with the latest insider to come from that, and that's Emery Smith. You might see him on social media. Emery's the it guy right now for that. But we worked with him for a few years. Then he disappeared for a while, and he's come out as an insider now, and they've actually been trying to kill him. They killed his dog, and they're after him because he's openly talking at conferences now about all the dissections he used to do on biologic beings. Some of them may have been manufactured in underground labs. Some of them were truly ET. But he was in that program for many years. He's talking about it now. Now, he's talked with Corey Goode, and I'm really unclear. I don't personally believe Corey, but I believe Emery. And yet they've been on the same show together, talking with each other. So I'm really unclear what's happening there. You know, I'm honest, being honest with you. I believe my friend Emery, but I don't believe the other guy. And yet they seem to nod and talk about the same things. I think one guy's telling the truth and the other one's making stuff up. But that's just me. And there's a lot of controversy around there. You know, a lot of people love one, hate the other. They love David Wilcock, hate the other guy. They love these two, hate. It's all over the map. And again, that's why I'm trying to stay out of that, because you can consume a lot of energy. Who's telling the truth? I read this. Let me read that. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. For someone who wants to pursue that, do that. That's not what we're about. We're about find your own truth, become Hollis, and meet your own Arcturian.
And make up your own mind.
And make up your own mind.
Do your own research, make up your own mind.
Yeah, pretty much. And you don't have to agree with us.
Yep.
Yeah, we're just about empowering people right now to go to those 7 steps on the website. And I do have to say about those 7 steps, human beings, everyone in my network has taken those and modified them. Some people will add drumming, some will add crop circle tones, some of them chant, whatever. It's all about getting in the high vibration. And the bottom line is, if you're coming from your heart, and if chanting gets you there, or playing a beautiful song and a melody, or classical music gets you there, I think that's great. It's all the group bonding and raising your vibration together, and that's what's important. And that's what I tell people when they come to the website. I say, hi, nice to meet you. I know you're not going to follow all these as I've written them, but please, when you modify what you're doing, stick to the core, which is it's all about goodwill, intention, your vibration, your love, your mind, your heart, your sincerity. Because they will detect that, and they won't come near you if you're not that, no matter how much drumming you do or whatever. If you've really got bad intentions, they can read you. They can read us.
You have to pick the group of people that you're with and really know them well enough to know that
Eventually, yeah.
that negativity's on them.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. And there's give and take, and there's trial and error with that, like there is anything with anything else that humans do when they pick a group of people, whether it's a manager in a company or a Boy Scout leader or something or whatever. Yeah. So I'll get you next.
So human technology and science seem to have accelerated in the last 100 years or so. You know,
Wow.
Quantum physics and nuclear power and TV, radio, computers, artificial intelligence. And I'm just wondering, like you mentioned, how they seem to be able to control cell phones and to turn them on and do things with them. And I'm wondering how much of our technology and our science has come from alien sources?
Depending on who you talk to, quite a bit. Yeah, the shutdown of the alien thing happened in the late 50s when, and Eisenhower, who had a meeting, there are people I know that have told us, warned us that the military-industrial complex had gone rogue and gone underground. Up until then, the contactee movement of the 50s was large and growing and was a very open subject until they stuffed that. And they stuffed it because they were militarizing the whole matter and trying and shooting down some of these technologies and reverse engineering them. And that's how people say how lasers came about, night vision goggles and other things. This is what I'm hearing. So the answer is yes. And there was a definite mechanism and a definite intention to do that.
Right.
And they kept the best stuff for themselves, because when you talk to our friend Emery Smith, he goes, oh yeah, lasers, that's so old school. You won't believe what they're doing now. That was since the 60s, you know, and I've heard that from more than one insider. They kept the best stuff for themselves. We think we're living in a really gee whiz world. They've got stuff that's out of Star Trek, apparently. And we should be the beneficiaries of it. You had a question.
This is sort of a personal question. Do any of the contactees ever make a contact or a buddy or like make a friend or a professional contact,
You mean with
with an
an
ET?
Hollis can
I'm
speak,
told that people do.
and you have an
that-
exercise for that.
Oh, yeah.
She teaches you how to do it.
Okay. If you're making contact, you probably have at least one being that can find you and with whom you are making regular contact. I learned this from what I do. It's different because I'm trained as a hypnotherapist, so I do it a little differently than he did. But the first time I did this meditation, I was shocked. There was a whole ring of beings around me. Yeah. And some of them I had seen, and some of them were like, really? And it was overwhelming. I mean, I have a couple dozen probably. So.
No, I think I had a gentleman back
yeah.
here. Yeah, you were next.
Yeah, I was curious to your impressions over the last 10 years or so about the Dan-Burdick connection. I don't know whether you were aware of that through the Camelot group or...
No, I don't know. I've heard the name, but I don't know anything about it. Sorry. There was a question over here. There's Z.
I was just going to mention a book, Beyond the Light Barrier, that was written by a South African woman.
Beyond the light,
Beyond the Light Barrier,
LIFE or
not L-I-G.
She was impregnated because she had a relationship with an ET, if I recall. Yeah. And then actually, back in her country, she was actually believed and given an award or something.
Yeah, she has enough evidence. She actually was taken to his home planet
Yeah.
where she gave birth and was there for a period of time, and the child was kept there, and she came back.
Yeah, I've heard the story. Go ahead. Okay.
Do you see us as humans going through these different dimensions as we fear that they are doing?
See us?
They go through, they're, and can coexist in many dimensions, and maybe we do, but we just don't.
Yeah, I believe that. It's all simultaneous. If you're asking if there are multiple layers and we're just not aware, we've got our five senses that are tuned in a certain way. Yeah, I totally believe all these other dimensions exist around us. We need to evolve to the place where we can increase our sensory. And that's something I wanted to mention that Hollis does at our retreats, is teaches people how to recognize your psychic stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, this isn't, okay. I want to talk about your question first, and we are, the way I see it is, we are spiritual, multidimensional beings that happen to have physical bodies in this place and time. And our physical bodies actually limit our sensory acuity. So we can only, in this body, get physical information. You know, like my physical eyes only see this much. My physical ears only hear a certain range. Well, dogs hear more than we do, right? Well, why wouldn't that be true for every sense? That there's a lot more there. I mean, we know there's a much larger light spectrum than we can physically see. But until we knew that, like humanity just thought, well, anything I can see, that's all there is. And now we know that's not actually true. And so what I would say is we can extend our senses into what are called psychic senses, and that for every physical sense there's a psychic or clair sense. So in order of most common to least common, for feeling, right, because most people have proprioception, and that, again, there's a fine line between proprioception and clairsentience, which is psychic feelings. For seeing, there's also clairvoyance. People talk about that. And like Kosta said earlier, there are two kinds. There's internal, which is getting information, right? Seeing pictures inside your mind. And external, which is seeing, auras or beings that are not physically there, ghosts, whatever. Again, and you can be good at one, the other, both, none. And For hearing, clairaudience. Like I hear, I'm going to sound crazy, I hear people talking to me, right? And I know from many, many years of doing this that there's a voice right here. That one's accurate. It's kind of male and it's accurate. The other ones I don't know as well, but that one's always right. Okay, so then there is also clairolfaction, which is smell. It's kind of rare, but people will say like, oh, I smelled my grandmother's perfume and she's been gone a long time. Or, my dad's cigar and he's not around anymore. That kind of stuff, that happens. There's also clairgustation for taste. People will taste things that aren't really there. Often it'll be like, oh, there's a metallic taste in my mouth or whatever. Again, very rare, although I did recently meet somebody who said that happens to him all the time. That's like a common, wow, okay. And then there is a true sixth sense, the sense that dare not speak its name, which is telepathy, which, everybody's really freaked out about, right? Oh, what if somebody can read my mind? Okay, so telepathy has two parts. There's sending and there's receiving. You can be good at one, good at the other, good at neither, good at both. And it's called telepathy if it's with a physical being. It's called channeling if it's with a non-physical being, but it's the same thing. Direct mind-to-mind communication. So, okay.
Those are with the UFO beings.
Yes, absolutely. With physical beings, with non-physical beings. And by the way, just my opinion here, the internet is a precursor to telepathy. We all got to learn manners before we can have telepathy.
Good luck with that, right?
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Speaking of channeling, are you guys familiar with Bashar, who's channeling his future self 700 years in the future, and he's a hybrid human?
Yeah.
I think he's an awesome
Okay.
channel.
I'm not a follower, but
Right.
the few clips I've heard I found really made sense to me.
Yeah.
As in terms of instruction and explaining how things are. But that's all I know. Up here. And then I'll get you in the back. Go ahead, yeah.
I just want to share something that is tangentially related to clairvoyance and all this, and I love your comment on clairgestation. There's a woman who was reading sharks, and she says, they don't like the taste of human beings. They're mushy salty. Why they'll just take a nip in the food, And her name is Anna, and she has a website called The Animal Communicator, Anna Breitenbach.
Okay.
And it's just so opening to understanding how connected we are, not only with each other, but with all the life around us.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I forgot to mention we can talk to animals and plants, and I had a big rock talk to me once. That was a shock. Like, oh, I didn't know they could do that. Yeah. Anyway. Okay.
We knew that was coming.
So here's what happened. It was kind of funny. I was hiking up in the Santa Cruz Mountains with a couple friends, and we went down into like a canyon where there had never been any development, because you had to kind of climb down in there. And we all decided to meditate. So we each picked a big boulder. And I decided I'm going to lie down. So I'm lying down on my boulder. And I get a lot of information through my heart, like it'll come directly that way. So I'm lying on the boulder in the sun. And, you're pretty near San Jose Airport, actually. And a jet went overhead. And I hear this, like it came through my heart, but like this voice went, "What's that?" And it said, "Why is there thunder and no rain?" That sound, because it doesn't have eyes, right? So I'm going, okay, there's this thing. It was kind of hard. It was like flying through the sky, and it makes that noise as it moves, So I tried to explain, and it kind of went, oh, okay. And then that was the end of it. But, but I mean, think about it. If you're a rock, you wouldn't know what that was either, right? But I mean, and here's the thing. The weirdest stuff that happens to me, I know it's real because I couldn't have made it up.
She doesn't have much of an imagination. It's true. She doesn't have which makes her the perfect subject, because we know that I would be the wrong one. I was into science fiction and fantasy and, from early on and all kinds of things.
And I fell asleep in Star Wars.
She fell asleep in Star Wars, yeah. That's right. So she has no imagination and is proud of it, I guess. But again, that makes her a good subject, because when anomalous things happen around her, it's with the afterthought, Hollis couldn't have made that up. So, yeah, in the back.
I just wanted to add a couple sources because of David bringing up Beyond the Light Barrier. That's by Elizabeth Clark. Right. Two that really stood out for me in the late 90s. Alec Newell, who wrote Coevolution, and Michael Desmark. He was Australian, or I got it reversed. He was Australian, and Michael Desmarquet, who wrote Abduction to the Ninth Planet, and really it wasn't an abduction. He was asked if he would help. Unfortunately, today those books, Jeff Marquet's book, last time I looked it up, was over $400.
Ooh.
So if you can find it anywhere used, obviously do so. Coevolution has dropped back down from that same price range to 70, which means you might be able to get lucky and find it for 25. When we talk about government sources, and I'm with you all the way, Corey Good and David Wilcock, that stuff drives me crazy. Who I would say spend your time looking at is the former CEO of Lockheed, Ben Rich, who in 1995, on his deathbed, came forward and said, look folks, we've been communicating with these aliens, and I'm one of the people, firsthand. People are wondering if we're going to go to Mars. Not only have we gone to Mars, we are currently in 95, in other solar systems. Ben Rich is the developer of the stealth fighter and bomber. So we're not talking about people who talk a good game. We're talking about brilliant people who have had the courage to come forward. And he said, the truth is, I have the view of the Pentagon, which is, to answer Mary's question, well, why don't they just come forward? Why don't they just come forward? A lieutenant colonel told me in 1999, who was with the Pentagon, Bill, what do you think would happen to our infrastructure if, and he didn't say the president, and he didn't say the United Nations, he said if the Pentagon came forward and said, yes, there are aliens, they have bases under the sea, they're in the polar regions, there are more species now than we can even keep track of, they can come and go, they can travel invisibly. What do you think that would do to our infrastructure with where we're at, just what you're talking about? Banking, insurance, gas. And he said, secondly, where do you think our most brilliant minds would go who are at Google and Apple? They're going to not give a damn about the next iPhone. They're going to be going, what can we learn from these guys? And our whole economy and it would shift. And I said, good, let's go for it.
Yeah, that's what I say.
Because all we've been doing is delaying it from the 50s when it was almost done.
Yeah, I agree with all that. And I think... What?
I'm glad you feel that way, young man, because that's why I left the Pentagon.
Wow.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
And I have to say that imagine just on one topic alone, and this strikes it home for me personally, how many of us have known anybody close to us that died of cancer? Probably every single one of us are close to it, Imagine if that announcement came from a government saying, oh yeah, they had technologies in the 50s that would have wiped out cancer. How much anger would there be, just alone on that issue for anyone who's ever lost anyone to that disease, and saying, you had the cure and you kept it from us? There would be revolt, there would be anger. And that's just one issue. All those other technologies they've been holding back on would touch other populations and piss them off too. They would have, that's why they won't do disclosure like that. That's why we got to do it. They're not giving this stuff to us. They are literally taking our loved ones from us and killing them.
Absolutely. We always think of cancer, but the other thing is right aligned with that is Alzheimer's and dementia. That would be eliminated too with the technologies that could bring forward.
All true. Yeah. Go ahead.
I guess this is kind of leading me to what I've been thinking a lot about all the time on my own, and if I ever say things to people, I sound like I'm griping, and I'm not I'm very untechnological. I'm not a scientist, not an engineer. I'm an artist, and I read a lot. So, and I've always been interested in spiritual matters, but the thing is, I have no background in science. So I feel very small maybe making this comment among all of you who are. But it seems like to me, with the problems of the world all around, poverty and lack of food and war and what's going on right now with the fires in California and the floods on the other side of the United States. And we have these brilliant minds in Silicon Valley, and I'm so frustrated with them because they're making fucking Fitbits. They're using their brains to make toys. And I know these little things lead to bigger things sometimes, but I'm so sick of all the garbage out there that we're being...
It's consumerism.
I
Yeah.
hate it. I can't stand it anymore.
Yeah.
The internet's one thing, but there's important problems to be worked on in the world. And it just seems like they're all wasting their damn time on these little stupid things. And all the kids are just getting so excited and they want to pour their minds into this, and that's not the point. I am so angry.
Well, let's channel that. I hear you about that, and when you talk about the kids, that comes back to the point I was wanting to make, what I've made before. The millennials and whatever the generation after them, someone help me on that, is being called now. Z. They're having all those toys dangled in front of them, and they're in their faces in their phones, and I'm one of those. I've become that too. It happens so easily. But let's do a reset. Let's reach those people because they're looking at the world right now, those who are buying the Fitbits and all that, and they're having questions like, why is there so much war? Why is there so much this and that? I mean, they see the problems. We have to give them some solutions. We have to change the vision. We have to evolve our consciousness. And they're more ready than others. So what I would say is, I recommend try to do what I do, which is just channel that into reaching them and saying, you can change the future, predict it by changing it. You have to rechannel that, because the other forces that are creating the Fitbits and all that, they're not going to stop doing that until something else neutralizes their system. And what can neutralize that is people waking up and realizing consumerism for its own sake is really a dead end. It's destroying our planet. And the U.S. is probably the worst example of that, but not the only. Let's give people a vision. I think that generation really has lit up and can be and touched. And I'm trying my best to let them know they've got cosmic brothers, sisters, and cousins who want to reach out to them and help them to have a future. What good will be all the Fitbits if things go up, with a big climate disaster that's global or whatever? None of that will matter. There are bigger problems, and we need to reorient them to that if we can. So you can become an influencer. No, I share your outrage.
Yeah, me too.
But what gets me up in the morning, I'll tell you, and going, is that little number I came up with, 1.3 billion people that agree with what we do. And it's not because we're doing it, it's because it needs to be done. We are surrounded right now by the biggest story in humans' history, which is connection with civilizations from elsewhere who are here in large numbers. And we're playing with Fitbits and doing other stuff and destroying the planet, when we could be instead engaging with them and asking them, you were here once. Well, what did you do that got you past this? Can we learn something? Can we have some guidance? Can we talk? Let's talk. That's why we named it. Hollis came up with that. So it's all about that. That's a way to channel that, is talk to ET, talk to your young ones, let's just all talk about the bigger things and keep that group feel going. That's got to be the answer. We'll just neutralize it away. Yeah.
It seems like throughout history, there's usually been a small percentage of people who are thought leaders or people that move things along, and it doesn't have to be. I mean, 1.3 billion people is a huge number, or a huge percentage of the population of the Earth. It probably would take significantly less to make things move along like you're trying to do. The other thing is that if some of these facts that the governments have been hiding for so long came out and it made certain people think about what could have been, chances are that would be a transitory period where people would be able to get over it in a relatively short time. It's not like you're going to hold a grudge that, okay, now these things are available. They could have been available before, but now they are. Let's just go with it and move on. And I think, some countries are already starting to think of how they can give incomes to people who don't have jobs, because automation has taken away a lot of opportunities for people around the world to work. And so people are starting to think about how to rechannel people's activities and lives to work towards a kind of a nirvana society. So we need to encourage those kinds of thinking too. And the problem is that there's a lot of people who are kind of selfish, and it's like I built this with my own hands, and I'm an independent person, and I don't need anyone else. I think that kind of attitude fights the attitude of loving your neighbor and world, trying to do what's best for everyone, not just for yourself. So I don't know. It seems like with all the things that you see on the internet, some cracks are starting to form in this information. More is getting out, and all I can do is hope that in my lifetime that there's some significant changes, that come about due to greater enlightenment. So anything you can do to do that.
Well, we are it. We are that change, and
All of us.
And I remember where we were in the '60s versus this topic alone, which was not discussed. It was the crazy ant in the basement topic, right? And now we can discuss it. And granted, we live in a geographical area here that's known for being pretty tolerant, progressive. Not all pockets of it, but we can bring this topic up now in ways that we couldn't have when I was a teenager. So what I'm saying is I see progress, and I'm with you on that, but we need to speed it up a little bit more if we can. And it's a change in consciousness this planet needs. This is all a spiritual thing. How are we doing on time? I want to make sure.
Probably should call it
Call it a night. Okay.
and,
Thanks.